Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked Fly Fishing. And today let's talk about saving our leaders by using tippet rings. Now, I don't know if you've heard of these before. Here's one brand, there's multiple brands. And these are tiny stainless steel rings. This one's a steelhead size and this one's a trout size. And the way we use these rings is we tie them onto our leader and then we tie our tippet onto the ring. So you go from leader to ring, ring to tippet. And it replaces the tippet knot. Like for example, you could use a blood knot or a triple surgeon's loop, double surgeon's loop. This replaces them. And you say to yourself, why would I bother? Why, I've been using knots all my life. Why should I go to rings? Well, there's a simple reason. I've got my leader here. I've got my tippet spools. And as I tie flies on, this tippet is getting shorter and shorter. So then I tie on some more tippet and I keep using it and goes down and down and down. And then I have to tie some more on. And every time I knot tippet to this leader, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So as a consequence, at some point, you're going to be knotting into the taper, which is not a good thing. So what we do by using a tippet ring, a trout tippet ring on a trout leader, you will keep your leader at a constant length. And the only thing that changes is the tippet section you're putting on. The leader itself never changes. So as an example, you might start with a 9-foot leader and it gets back to maybe 7.5 foot long because you've tied a bunch of flies to it. Tie a tippet ring on it at that stage, and then you're adding your tippet to the ring, and that leader never gets any shorter than 7.5 feet. So it's a good way to conserve your leaders by adding tippet rings. And no, they won't drag the fly underneath the water. They're too small, too light, and they're not going to have any impact in that sense. So you're not going to affect the float of your dry fly by using one of these things. So they're good for saving your leaders. It gives you some other benefits too, is that it makes the job of tying on tippet simpler. I mean, it's like tying onto a hook, and I find it's very quick and easy to tie onto. You're not fumbling with two tag ends and all that kind of good stuff. I realize double surgeon's knots are quick to tie, but sometimes you can get into some issues with other styles of knots. So you get less knot problems. Often you're able to use a stronger knot with a tippet ring than with when you're just knotting using, say, a double surgeon's knot. So there are certain benefits in that regard as well. But the thing is, this leader doesn't get any shorter as you keep adding tippet. That's the big thing. That's the reason why we want to use them. They also come in a steelhead size too. And I would recommend the trout size for trout leaders, so 4X, 5X, 6X, 7X, that kind of thing. If you're getting into the thicker monos, you want to use the steelhead size because they're a bigger diameter. I can go up to saltwater size mono on here, heavy duty stuff, and it'll fit through. If you use this trout leader and you try to put some 15-pound test through it, you're going to have fun, okay? It's not going to fit. So you're going to want to use a steelhead size for, bass, pike, blah, 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 blah. The bigger fish, the bigger mono, the bigger fluorocarbon, that's where you're going to go up to the steelhead size. Now, when you go to tie one of these on, there's a little trick. They come on a snap, all right? They're sold on a snap. Maybe you can see that little snap there by my finger. How you tie on your first piece, like if I'm tying on my leader onto the tippet spool, I do not take the ring off the tippet. What I do instead is I separate one and put one closest to the release. So, there's the release on the snap. I will put the tippet ring, one tippet ring very close to the release, and I'll put my mono through it, tie my knot while it's still attached to the snap. Then I'll remove it from the snap, trim the tag end off, and now it's not going anywhere. Because I guarantee you, if you remove the tippet ring first, then try to tie it on, you're going to end up dropping it, losing it. So if you leave it attached to the snap before you tie it on, and then you tie it on while it's still on the snap, it'll work just fine. Just don't tie the snap at the same time, okay? Just be careful you're only tying the tippet ring and not the tippet ring and the snap. But other than that, it's very easy to do. So when you take it off the snap, you're not going to lose it. It's on the end of your leader. Now you can tie your tippet to it to your heart's content. One other application, and this is strictly steelhead size, is when I've got my polyleaders here. And I know you can put double surgeons knots at the end of them. No, sorry, not double surgeons knots. Perfection loops, double surgeons loops, perfection loops. You can put those loops on and loop-to-loop connect stuff. But one of the problems is if you've ever caught a fish on a polyleader where you've loop-to-looped the tippet to it, and then afterwards you want to try and get it apart, well, you can. It's a fiddle. It's much easier if you use tippet rings. I always used to use perfection loops. Now I only use tippet rings when I use my polyleaders. I'll knot the polyleader to the tippet ring, and then the tippet ring to the tippet. And again, it's very easy to replace. Again, a more durable knot tends to last longer. You tend to lose less. You'll often lose it at the fly instead of losing it at the perfection loop. And that's when you snag up. And also, you're never nibbling back on the polyleader because the amount of knot tying material on the polyleader is limited. So you're not constantly nibbling that back. You know, again, you tie it on, you forget about it. You just keep using it. So again, I would use the steelhead size. Whoops, I'm dropping stuff here. I would use the steelhead size tippet rings for polyleaders that are salmon and steelhead. And if you go down to a trout size polyleader, then you can get away with using the trout sized tippet rings. But other than that, you know, as I say, the only thing you really want to keep in mind is the trout size are quite tiny, and you would have difficulty putting thicker mono through them. So if you're going to use thicker mono, go up to the steelhead size. And as I say, when you're tying it on for the first time, leave it on the snap while you're tying the first piece of mono to it, because then you'll have no trouble tying the second piece on. But if you take it off the snap first, you know, good luck. You'll probably drop it on the floor and lose it. They're very convenient. It's pretty well all I use these days, and it saves me a lot of bother. And as you are out in the water, it's much easier to manage things. Your leader's never getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So keep that in mind. Tippet rings, they work like a charm. Cheers.